Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Community Diversity Committee for the City of Waterbury. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Roll call. Mayor O'Leary.
Here on his behalf.
Pastor Christopher Reese.
Here.
Jackie Davis.
Present.
GINNE-RAE Clay. GINNE-RAE Clay. Thought I saw her here. Okay.
She's
Pastor Kelsey Hobson. Pastor Hobson. Sherry Lamb. Jenny Fonseca. Althea Marshall Brooks here. Jalea West. Margaret Hayward said she would be absent. Amari Brantley will be absent. Jim O'Rourke will be absent. Pastor Castellano will be absent. Andrew Beeman. Andrew Beeman. I thought he was. Oh, he's here. I can't hear him though.
here.
Okay. Dr. Verna Ruffin will be absent. Sabira Gordon. Here. Albana Lame. And Attorney Isaias Diaz.
Here.
Okay. Now I'd like to lead us all in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
And to the republic for which it stands,
Which stand.
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
I don't believe my name was called.
I didn't say your name, Mr. Mosley. My apologies.
It's all right.
It's here on the list. Mr. Sean Mosley.
Present.
Thank you for being here. My apologies for that.
No problem.
We will move right into our agenda. You should have received your email with the meeting minutes from our last convening. I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes for our March meeting.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Any questions? Discussion? Okay. All right. All those in favor of accepting the meeting minutes as received, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? None? The motion carries. All right, we'll move to the next item on our agenda, and I'll turn it over to our governance chair for the governance committee report and recommendations. Mr. Diaz?
Good evening, everybody. So at our last meeting, we put together a tentative roster for each subcommittee, first by preference, then by necessity. Not everybody responded, but the majority of people did. And again, this is a tentative list, so if we have to switch here and there, it's something that we can definitely work on. So the subcommittee rosters right now are as follows. On law enforcement, I have myself, Pastor Castellano, Sherry Lamb, Sean Mosley, and potentially Jackie Davis. There was some discussion about Jackie being made a full member because right now I'm not sure if it's, I don't know if the word we used was a fill-in or a surrogate, and whether we could just elevate her to a regular board member instead of a surrogate. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but I believe Mac was going to help us with that, and we're going to handle that at our next meeting. For the education subcommittee, we have Dr. Ruffin, Jim O'Rourke, Sabira Gordon, Pastor Reese, and Amari Brantley. For Economic and Housing, we have GINNE-RAE Clay, Andrew Beeman, David Morgan, Jenny Fonseca, and Margaret B. And for Public Health, we have Jalea West, Pastor Hobson, Albana Lane, and Althea Marshall Brooks. We also took the liberty of appointing temporary chairs so that we can break off the subcommittees and the meetings and they could elect their own chair for the subcommittee. I'm the temporary one for law enforcement, but obviously I don't want to carry that one very long because I'm already co-chair of the governance committee. For education, we have Sabira Gordon. For economic and housing, we have GINNE-RAE Clay. And for public health, we have Althea Marshall Brooks, Madam Chair. That's our tentative lineup, and that's going to be our initial working groups. Two other things that we discussed. First was we already lost some people since meeting, and we thought that it would be a good idea to keep the number at 22. That way our co-chairs could have the liberty of overseeing all the subcommittees, but wouldn't have to serve on any particular subcommittee since they'll be overseeing them. So we came up with a way to appoint, well, we're working on a way to appoint new members, and we wanted to do so through a nominating committee. This nominating committee, and President Clay had this brilliant idea, I can't take credit for it, is to be comprised of the chair of each subcommittee, which I think it's a great idea. So that's something that we have to handle in discussion tonight. And finally, we're going to work with MAC in order to get the list of other people who wanted to serve to see if we could fill the vacancy. So the goal is to stay at 22, or to get ourselves up to that number again. So each subcommittee can have 5 committee members, and so that the co-chairs can oversee all of them without having to actively serve on a subcommittee. With regard to how they're going to function, we have to have a follow-up governance committee meeting because we want to make sure we don't run afoul of any rules in the charter or any statutes. So that's something that we have to tackle at our next governance committee. But for now, we have our temporary subcommittees and the temporary chairs. And by our next meeting, we should have a fine-tuned machine. And Madam Chair, that's my report.
Thank you, Attorney Diaz, for your report. Are there any questions for our governance chair? All right, seeing no questions, I entertain a motion to accept these names for the 4 named committees.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I'd like to actually, if we could modify that, should be 5 committees. An additional committee was proposed. The nominating committee was proposed as well. I said 4, I should have said 5. So can I have a new motion for the 5 committees to be inclusive of the newly recommended committee, the nominating committee?
So moved.
Second? Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
I second.
All right, questions, discussion?
Discussion.
Just
Okay.
I just want to make sure that I heard correctly that the chairs that were appointed, they're temporary chairs until the committees nominate a chair.
That's correct, Pastor Reese. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Any other questions? Mr. Mosley?
Yeah, I'll just from a procedural standpoint, I'll rescind my initial motion and just make an amendment to it that we add the 5th committee, which would be the nominating committee.
Okay. Thank you. All right, any other questions, comments, discussion? Thank you for that amendment, Mr. Mosley. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
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 Those opposed can do so by saying no, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. We have our committees. I'm excited. Let the work begin. Yes. This is where the good stuff happens. Excited. All right. The next item on our agenda is we have clarification on the subcommittee's adherence to the FOIA by Chief of Staff DEMAC. Mr. DEMAC.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So after the last governance meeting, I met with the City's Corporation Council to seek clarity on open meeting requirements as they relate to subcommittees. I shared with the co-chairs that a subcommittee of a committee must follow the Freedom of Information Act. So as our subcommittees have been formed under the auspice of that subcommittee title, they must follow FOIA. She did follow up by saying, work groups or informal sessions of a breakout group of less than a quorum would not be considered a public meeting, but given the fact that the members are going to be convening under the auspice of subcommittee, they will be subject to the open meeting requirements. And, personally, I know that, transparency and open access is important to the mayor. And so, I believe that the, scheduling of these meetings, the broadcasting of these meetings are important to fulfilling that mission of the committee to be transparent and accessible.
Okay. Any questions for Mac? Mr. Diaz?
So when just so I'm clear on this, so anytime that a subcommittee meets, it's going to be broadcast on YouTube, and we have to make sure we coordinate it through the clerk's office. Like, we can't do anything informal, like meet at a coffee shop or anything like that.
I think if you were meeting under the auspice of just a couple members of the committee meeting, for a coffee, and then there were no formal recommendations from that coffee that were brought forward to the larger committee, I think that'd be okay. But given the fact that we've set up the structure with subcommittees when conferring with the Corporation Counsel's office, she stated that a subcommittee of a committee must follow the Freedom of Information Act.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mac? Okay. Thank you, Mac. The next item on our agenda is discussion around the vacant seats. Our governance chair shared that there was some discussion around staying at 22. At this time, we currently have 3 seats that would become or be deemed vacant. And that is of Mr. Ben Carr, Dr. James Gatling, and James Saunders. So at this time, those would be the 3 vacancies that we would be looking to fill. Matt, can you give us some insight on if there are any issues we have, any things we have, matters we have to comply with filling those seats?
So the authority to fill vacancies on a board or commission does lie with the mayor. In my conversations with him, I've updated him on the vacancies and how that would impact the functionability, if that is a word, of the subcommittees. So look forward to receiving nominations from the committee. As we discussed in the last governance subcommittee meeting, there is an existing list of individuals who have expressed interest in joining the committee initially that were not selected. So looking forward to reviewing, or the mayor looks forward to reviewing nominations, the existing list, and any potential folks that he has in mind with the co-chairs to ultimately identify the replacements and compile a complete committee.
Thank you. So at this time, if folks are prepared to do so, we would welcome any nominations for filling those 3 seats that we can bring back and review with the already compiled list of those who had expressed interest, to then bring back recommendations for those 3 seats. Any nominations at this time?
Madam Chair, I just have a question, procedural question. So are we voting to submit the 3 names forward to the mayor, or are we just discussing the names that will be lifted for nomination?
It's a very good question, Mr. Mosley. I think as Matt clarified, we would take names from this larger committee and bring it back as recommendations for consideration along with the others.
Got it.
Madam Chair, so to my understanding, we just voted on a fifth committee, which is the nominating committee. Wouldn't that be their responsibility to nominate, to bring nominations to us to give to the mayor?
I'm okay with deferring to the newly formed nominating committee as well. But we can take nominations here, or we can defer to the nominations committee, which is newly formed. We can do that. Jenny?
I mean, my recommendation is that if we just nominated a nominating committee to do this, it should fall on their responsibility.
Okay, Jenny?
Yeah, and I, for one, wasn't prepared to make nominations today, so I would like some time to think about that, if possible.
Okay. And as chair of the Economic Opportunities and Housing Committee, you would be a member of the nominating committee, and there would be time to do that there. Attorney Diaz, did you have a question, comment?
I kind of agree with Pastor Reese. I think we should probably, well, I guess I would say this. I think my preference would be for us to go through a subcommittee meeting and appoint the people who are actually going to put in charge of each group. Because that's actually going to be the nominating committee. Right now we're temporary. And I don't really want to do both. I mean, I'm always willing to do both, but I want to give someone else an opportunity as well to have some input in our structural organization. So I personally would prefer that we did do it with the nominating committee, but after we have the people who are going to have sit as the chair of each subcommittee, because right now we're all just temporary.
Okay. All right. So we will table that for the nominating committee as discussed here. Any other comments, additional discussion?
Question, Madam Chair. With nominations, do you want us to submit resumes or any other information for the individuals, or just the name?
So as it appears here, the nominating committee will then decide the process for which they will consider names for vacancies. So we'll look to hear from them with regard to what will be required for any names that will be lifted for consideration.
Got it.
Any additional comments, questions?
I have a question through the chair. I guess now that we have our subcommittees, what how will we go about setting up meetings? Is there and maybe Mac, you can help us with this. What would be the process? We have to pick a night amongst the members. What would be the notice requirements for the clerk's office? Can we get a little feedback on that?
Yeah, so to the extent that we're going to have to identify a date and time that can be reoccurring on a monthly basis, for the subcommittees. That information, currently the way that we're operating, at least the committee as a whole, is that we are working with the co-chairs and Desiree in the city clerk's office to ultimately get the agenda out, as well as the public notice for the meetings. I would make a suggestion, just because I'm going to have to touch base with my colleagues in the city clerk's office in terms of their capacity to staff these meetings, given the rapidly expanding nature of the committee and the existing boards and commissions. I just want to make sure that the city clerk's office would be able to staff it. In the event that they couldn't, I think it'd be valuable if a member of the subcommittee was identified to take summary minutes to fulfill the public meeting requirement.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mac. Because that is, now we're at 6 subcommittees of this committee at this point, when you include governance. All right, so we will wait to hear back at our next meeting from MAC with regard to how we would best hold the meetings of the committees and to ensure that they're properly and adequately staffed.
Yeah, I think part of me, Chairman, I think it would be really helpful, I guess, to the extent that the first meeting date and time for the subcommittees could be established. And I think that could be a great starting point, where we're able to work with the acting chair of that subcommittee through the process. We're committed to working with the committee and the subcommittee to make sure that the procedural elements are accounted for and that the meetings run smoothly. But I think it'd just be very helpful if we could identify initial meeting dates for those subcommittees. And then I'd be happy to work with the acting chairs of those subcommittees to, as I said, fulfill those meeting requirements.
Okay. All the interim chairs for the named committees are on this call this evening. Are you prepared to have a discussion around when the meeting of your subcommittee will convene?
Perhaps perhaps maybe that's something that can be done offline. Send an email to the individual members of the subcommittee, and then if someone could let DESRA know, then we can go through the process of scheduling the meeting and working through the steps of putting together that agenda, putting together the public notice, and ultimately coordinating to have the meeting broadcast.
I have a procedural question. Do these meetings have to happen like in the evening, or can we figure out a time during the day that those meetings can happen?
Good question. Again, Mac, are we at it depends on the capacity of the city clerk's office, or if there's an identified person in the subcommittee who's willing to fulfill the role that city clerk would. If they do not have the capacity, the meeting time wouldn't be dependent upon their availability.
Yeah, so, we deeply appreciate our city clerk's office and especially Deb, for helping us do the roll call, keep the minutes. But to the extent that the subcommittees are smaller enough where a roll call could be taken and summary minutes could be taken, and that could be part of that opening conversation with the acting chairs. We have templates of what summary minutes look like. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay, yeah, that works, because I think I'd be happy to, as the acting chair, like get it moving. And so I'm happy to talk offline about what's the best way to do that.
Yeah, and Samira, I guess to directly answer your question, there's nothing to say that a subcommittee couldn't meet during the middle of the day. I think usually board and commission meetings have been held just because the membership have professional responsibilities during the day. But again, if you've got members of the subcommittee that are able to meet during the day, we'd be happy to work with them to find the most conducive time to meet.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Additional discussion? So we will then get an email out to the interim chairs for the committees to settle on a date and time for those committees to meet. All right. Okay. I believe we do not have any individuals who have registered to speak. Has that changed, Desra?
No, so we do not have any individuals registered to speak.
Okay. All right. Any other items for discussion? Jenny?
Yeah, I just wanted, I lost connection, so when we went over the minutes, my name is spelled incorrectly in the minutes. I would ask that it is GINNE, not IE.
Make that correction too. Thank you. We'll make sure there's a change to the minutes to make that correction. Any other items for discussion?
Madam Co-Chair, I just want to remind that the town hall meetings, a lot of issues came up last summer with the town hall meetings, and that the subcommittees definitely need to engage those issues. And I know, Mac, we have a spreadsheet of the issues which was raised from the town hall. So I just want to make sure that we are putting focus on those issues, because this committee was developed out of that town hall. And so I just want to make sure that we are addressing the concerns that the public raised last year.
Thank you. Can those notes from those town halls that were kept be provided to this committee and then into the interim chairs for the subcommittees that were established?
Most certainly.
Okay. I think that'll be a great starting point for everyone. All right. Any other concerns, items for discussion, consideration, questions?
So I'm back again. So how do we handle, and I guess this is for the whole group, how do we handle issues that come to us individually that the community raised? And so, for example, there was a Board of Education meeting where something happened in that meeting. We were notified of the issue that took place in that meeting. How do we go about handling or addressing the issues that are raised by the community that's not on the agenda?
I have a suggestion. Perhaps what we could do, if let's say there's a new issue and it falls under a specific subcommittee, that could be brought to the subcommittee chair's attention. They could discuss it in the subcommittee, and then maybe we can have at our future meetings a new business portion in the agenda where we can address new issues or interject new issues or suggest or recommend new issues that ourselves as a board, as a collective, can address or tackle. That's one recommendation, but I'm open to any idea anyone has.
Jenny, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. So I also have a recommendation, because one of the things we have to be careful is that we get the information, we get it accurately, and we have the opportunity to make sure it's documented properly. So we do have an email address, I believe, for the diversity committee, that folks would send their concern to the email. And then maybe whatever committee or whatever area it addresses, then that email could be sent to that committee chair, or subcommittee chair. And then they would know, and they would have it accurately, and so it would be documented in our general email box. And then they move to have the discussion. So I think you have to collect them someplace, and they have to have some kind of order.
I think that's a great recommendation for us to any additional items relative to the committees and their topics. You are charged with coming up with your scope, and my hope is that the notes from the town hall will help to form that, and that as we receive these recommendations or concerns, that they, and we ensure that they align with what the scope and the intent of the committees are. Because I'm sure there will be expressions around a number of issues continually coming up. But we want to make sure that we continue to move forward and not get sidetracked in any way with things that may not align with the direction and the intent of the committees that have been established.
I have another question on that. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jennifer Chair. If someone has a question or a concern that is not in line with the subcommittee's agenda, will someone respond to them and let them know? Is it even acknowledging that the concern has been received?
Mhm.
That's why I don't think it's good to kind of verbally tell someone or verbally tell a co-chair that that should be a formal, just so that the concern is recorded and the person with the concern knows that it's reached the committee.
So we're really thankful that Desra has been at this point monitoring and managing the email address that we have. I think we can discuss with her the process for receiving those requests and concerns that might come from the public with regard to these topic areas. And I agree with you. We should definitely extend the courtesy and provide a response to anyone that does inquire or submit something for consideration. And Desiree, we can talk about that process. Did you have, I see you're off mute.
Oh, no, so I don't have any comment at this time. We can definitely talk about it. I just wanted to unmute myself in the event that there was a question asked.
So Mac, I have a question then to Jenny's point about, and Pastor Reese as well. So would these committees then be required to create or allow for public speaking at their meetings as well?
So my understanding is that public speaking is ultimately something that we've elected to include as part of the agenda in the spirit of the committee's mission, transparency and open accessibility. I think that's something that the subcommittees can choose.
So maybe as the committee is reviewing the notes from the respective town halls and beginning to develop your scope, that you might want to solicit input from the community to, before you finalize what that is, if you feel that's pertinent to your next steps as a committee. Any comments, questions? This is all of us. We're all in this. We're all in this.
So I do have a comment. So if we're having our subcommittee meetings, I would recommend that we not have public comments during those subcommittee meetings. That if there is public comment or public speaking, that public speaking be reserved for the full committee meeting.
Okay.
But if we have an issue, so let's say at the public speaking portion of our big meeting, someone raises an issue, it can be sent to the subcommittee. If something comes in via email, it is sent to the subcommittee, and then the subcommittee discusses it and brings it to the general committee, and then that response is made public.
Okay.
But I think the committee meetings will get really, really long in some cases if people are doing the public speaking piece during that time. So I think we should kind of leave it to the larger group and control it that way.
Okay. I think that works, and that provides a clear process for receiving information, sharing it back, and making sure folks are responded to. This is a new process, I think, and the topics that we are looking to tackle are ones that are going to be challenging in many ways, and making sure that folks feel heard in this process is important. But also we want to, make sure we're moving forward and getting work done and providing, recommendations as we were charged to do. So I'm just trying to make sure, we're covering all the bases as we prepare to move forward. That's all. So I appreciate that. I think that makes sense. Any other discussion? Any other questions, comments? Okay. Attorney Diaz?
So, so one thing I was curious about, once we have our subcommittees formed and we have the permanent leaders in place, is that when we're going to come up with the essentially the data and the issues that we want to tackle?
I believe that's the intent. That's the plan. Seems like the right next step. Definitely. I don't know if it would be fitting for the interim to begin the process of establishing the scope and the work and then hand it over to, the permanent chair or at least for the time in which he or they will serve in that capacity.
I agree with you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mosley, did you have a question, comment? Okay. All right. Anyone else? Any additional items for us to consider? We officially have our subcommittees. I'm excited about that. We'll definitely get an email out to hopefully get the meeting times set and established and get things moving. If there are no other items for discussion or consideration, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly second. All those who agree, say so by saying, we're out of here. No, yes. Say aye. Anyone opposed? All right, the motion carries. I just want to hear you guys laugh. I want us to really enjoy this. We have a great opportunity to do some really good stuff, and I want us to really enjoy this work as we're going forward and not, I feel sometimes we can be a little tight and tense on this meeting, and I don't want it to feel that way all the time. So it was good to hear folks laugh. So thank you so much for being here tonight. Our next meeting notice will go out as well as the email to set up the subcommittee meeting. So until then, be well and stay healthy. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Take
Good
care.
night.